Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Fem Sasuke, Soi-Fong and Fem Ichigo. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Konoha. Training Ground 44 Aka Forest of Death, second stage of the Chunnin Exam, 13 years after the QP attack. Naruto Uzumaki was in a bad position. His team had been all but decimated by Orochimaru's appearance. The snake summoner had torn apart every attempt that they sent at him with ease. It was almost sickening to him how close they came to losing it all. Now the traitor was planning on doing something that would probably result in his death, but Naruto didn't care. He had a kunai at the ready for just such an occasion. When Orochimaru slammed his hands into the seal that contained the QP, forming the five-pronged seal, he acted. Naruto quickly brought the kunai up into Orochimaru's skull in such a way as to seal his mouth shut and kill him simultaneously. But his action also resulted in his own death. Because his chakra control was screwed up by the seal, he was unable to generate any to stick to the tree and thus fell to his death. The last thing he heard in life was his teammate Satsune Uchiha screaming his name in horror and disbelief. The Uchiha heiress grabbed his dead body and started shaking him. "Naruto. Come on, don't die on me, you idiot. You promised that you wouldn't leave me. You promised." At that point she broke down completely. The one person she could trust with anything, including possibly rebuilding her clan, was now dead. Land of the Dead. Forest of Death. Background. Greatest battle music of all times. Number one's one else. When Naruto came to, he saw a black and white version of the forest he was just in. His two teammates were standing by his dead body, shaking him as though trying to wake him up. The most surprising part about this scene was the tears pouring down Satsune's face. He also saw Orochimaru's body and a massive white humanoid snake creature. It had the lower half of a snake and the upper body of a human, but it was more reptilian-looking form, looming over it. The creature hissed at him before attacking. Naruto felt that he could sense the aura of the creature. It was a much darker version of Orochimaru's own aura. That pissed him off. What I wouldn't give for a weapon. But his momentary distraction of desiring a weapon cost him a chunk of his side to this Nikkified Orochimaru. After he coughed up some blood, he put his head to his profusely bleeding side. Damn it. This can't be happening. Not after I just killed the Tucker. I won't let it end like this. As he finished speaking, his body was covered in three different colored auras. The first was a dark silver, the second a blood red, and the final was a cold gunmetal gray. While Orochimaru drew back in shock from the sudden outpouring of power from the brat that had ended his life, the so far unseen newcomer was merely shocked at the sheer power displayed by this new soul. Mindscape. Naruto saw a massive blood-stained battlefield in place of the sewer. Everywhere there were piles of corpses clad in samurai armor. But there were three piles that stood out, mostly because on top of each was a still alive person. On the center and largest pile, which was composed entirely of dead demonic-looking creatures, was a regal-looking man with silver hair clad in a royal blue trench coat. The second largest pile was made of more samurai and some demonic creatures. He was clad in partial red samurai armor and a torn white trench coat. He had burning red eyes and blood-red hair. The final pile was made of numerous different weapons, and on top of that pile was a man who looked like a traveling Shinto monk with a backpack on. The hat had the number 6 on it, and he had red ruby-like eyes. The man in the samurai armor spoke. "Well kid, you're obviously having trouble. We can't manifest fully because you're not yet fully ready to handle our power, but we will loan our power to you for now. Say these words. Destroy all in your path. Back to the afterlife. On him." At that roared name, a 6-foot-long katana appeared in his hands. The blade looked to be made of pure silver. The handguard was a normal rectangular guard but was made of pure gold from the looks of it and had a brown wrapped ivory handle. He then disappeared before reappearing behind Orochimaru and sliding his blade into its sheath. The half-snake monster burst apart in a fountain of blood. As soon as the sword clicked in completely, it then disappeared. Then Naruto passed out from using this new power before he was completely ready. When the shadowed figure was sure that Naruto was unconscious that stepped into the light, it was Captain Uruchi of the 2nd Division of the 13th Court Guard. She picked up Naruto's unconscious form and grinned. "Well, that was interesting. I have a feeling that the Soul Society will never be the same again once you arrive." Before she left with our hero's unconscious form, she looked over at his dead body and felt a stab of sympathy at the pain that she saw in the raven-haired girl's eyes. It looked like she was completely broken by the boy's death. She felt as if she should let him at least say goodbye, but judging by the feeling of the forest and the fact that although he had his Anpakudo, his spirit chain was almost gone, told her wit would not be advisable. So with a heavy heart she left with Naruto's soul. Not knowing of the vow the Uchiha made. "Naruto, I shall become Hokage for you. I swear it. I also swear not to revive my clan. With my death shall come the death of the Uchiha, but none are worthy to help revive the clan except you. Orochi had brought Naruto to the society. From there he had been recruited to join the academy, much to his annoyance, seeing as how he did not want to go to school again. He had changed his tune when he realized that the teachers wouldn't sabotage him and were actually willing to aid his endeavors to learn. He graduated at the top of his class in a record 4 decades, beating the previous record set by Captain Hitsugaya of 5 decades. Upon his graduation he was assigned to the 2nd Division, where he quickly rose through the ranks until he became lieutenant of his savior's division. He had also gained a well-earned reputation as Soul Society's true warrior because of his unstoppable power against the hollows he fought. His power had grown immeasurably to the point where he constantly spared with Captain Kenpachi, with a 50-50 chance of winning without bringing in his Hadu or his Taijutsu. He preferred that name to the idiotic name the Shinigami Academy had given it. His so-called Hadu was actually the jutsus of his world, but powered solely by spiritual pressure. On top of this he had achieved Bankai for both of his Zanpakuto, Anam and Kapatora. However, he had hidden the majority his skills and power to everyone but Kenpachi and Uruchi. He was an above-average lieutenant, but with the abilities of a lower-level captain. However, among the society he was favored to become the next captain of the 2nd Division. However, his rising star was squashed when he left the Soul Society alongside Captains Uruchi and Urahara. The main reason for his sacrificing his future was he felt obligated to help the two escape Soul Society after Urahara was falsely accused of creating hollows. However, he had also tried to kill Aizen because of Urahara's evidence, but he was driven away by 10 strange Shinigami, who seemed to have bones jutting from different parts of their bodies and in a variety of shapes. The one woman among them was attractive. His assessment was confirmed by Kaio, the spirit of Onam Shikai, commenting that he tapped that. He spent the next 90 years in the human world, mastering his abilities to perfection and completely synchronizing with his 2 Zanpakuto and mastering their attacks. Onam had 2 different skill sets depending on if he was in Shikai or Bankai. In Shikai he had access to one of the most brutal samurai of all time. Demon Eyes Kaio, the slayer of 1,000 men. When he used the Shikai he had access to all of Onam no Kaio's attacks in the Mumyo Jinpuryu style, from Mumyo Jinpuryu Satsujin Ken Mizuchi to the Mumyo Jinpuryu Aogi Kaoryu, all were at his disposal. If he had to wager a guess, he would say that his Shikai could destroy most Bankais when he goes all out. The name of the Shikai was Tenryu. The Bankai spirit was Virgil Sparta, one of the 2 heirs of the Spirit King. As such, his Bankai was near indestructible and all-powerful, for not only could it destroy Zanpakutos with ease, but it could also cut through anything, even Amino's rescue BAM I forgot the true term, and dimensions. The Bankai looked like an okatana made of liquid silver, with a circular handguard made of pure gold, with an embas pair of imperial dragons circling each other, and a white raped ivory handle. Its name was Yamato. Kapatora, which looked like a bamboo backpack now with the emblem for the 2nd Division and black ink embedded in it, on the other hand, could create any weapon that Naruto imagined. Anything from a dagger to an RPG could be formed. But that was only without using Shikai or Bankai. The Shikai, which looked like a gilded version of its normal state, allowed him to copy Zanpakutos up to their Shikai. The call to activate the Shikai was copy all who fall under your gaze. Kapatora. The Bankai was minorly different from the Shikai in appearance. It had a sliver-embossed 2nd Division emblem instead of the normal black one. However, it was its function that was different. It could copy even the Bankais of those Naruto fought. His spiritual pressure had also grown to be 10 times that of Yamamoto's. His Taijutsu was unrivaled. He had created many new jutsu that relied solely on spiritual pressure and were even more deadly than Bakuata, may have misspelt, number 90. His Kenjutsu, or Zanjutsu whatever you want to call it, had also become unrivaled. Basically he had become the closest thing to a god a Shinigami could become. He had spent the last 10 years learning all he could about the world of the living and the changes that it went through since the last time he had actually observed it, over 200 years ago. During that time he had formed a deep bond with his Zanpakuto. He had also found something startling out from the 3 spirits who inhabited the Zanpakutos. These 2 Zanpakutos were the direct creation of the Spirit King himself and would only appear in the true heir to his throne. Something he decided to keep secret for now. Right now he was concealed in a tree watching as Rukia Kichiki was being retrieved by her adopted elder brother Byakuya and his lieutenant, Renji Abarai. He was highly impressed by the power displayed by Isen Kurosaki's eldest daughter, considering that she didn't have any formal training in the ways of the Shinigami. The fact that she nearly beat a lieutenant was damned impressive. What was her name again? It started with an I-O-Ya. Ichiham, for her appearance look up. Browse.dv enter QH equals ion equals and global equals 1 and Q equals female plus ICHIGO number D4I0Y0C, real original listen. He was also impressed by the young Quincy girl that fought against the 2 members of 6th Division, Yuriko Ishida, for her appearance look up. Browse.dv entered Q equals female URYU and order equals 9 and offset equals 24 number D4P3FCJ. Still, despite all their potential, they both could use more training if they were to stop the execution that the idiots at Central 46 would obviously order. When he saw Byakuya spit on everything that he stood for, honoring your fallen opponent's attempts and not interfering in a one-on-one fight unless absolutely necessary, he decided to show himself. But the two 6th Division members and their prisoner as well as the two badly injured women. Background. Devil May Cry and I'm opening, full. Byakuya and Renji both stiffened when they felt an incoming flash step, one which Byakuya knew all too well. When the 5 people looked at where the immense pressure appeared, they saw an 18-year-old boy in a modified version of the Shinigami captain's uniform. It basically was a white trench coat with red samurai armor underneath it that had gold highlights. He was 6 foot 8 inches tall, had the physique of a god, short spiky blonde hair, oceanic blue eyes, 6 whisker-like marks on his cheeks, tanned skin, and a grin on his face. While Uchiha, Yuriko, and Rukia had light blushes adorning their cheeks, the two Shinigami reacted differently. While Renji readied himself for battle, Byakuya drew back a bit in shock at who this was. But the scowl he spoke. So you're still alive. Naruto Uzumaki, former lieutenant of the 2nd Division. Naruto grinned widened at Byakuya's obvious discomfort. I see you're still the same old person with a stick up your face that I remember. No matter though. Why are you taking your own adopted sister in like a common criminal? Byakuya snarled in anger, which shocked Renji and Rukia since he never showed emotion. That's none of your concern, traitor. Naruto's grin disappeared and in its place was the cold hard look of a merciless killer. Then I'll make it mine. But now is not the time for our fight, Byakuya. Return to the Sarate and prepare. Because I think these two young ladies will want to save her themselves from the morality and self-serving of the Central 46. But that he picked up the 2 injured women and left, and as soon as the 6th Division members were sure that he was gone, they left with their prisoner. Meanwhile, Naruto had arrived at Urahara's shop with his 2 companions, where they could be healed. In the meantime, Naruto, Uruchi, and Urahara began to plan out the assault on the Sarate to ensure that Aizen would not get his hands on the Hagwoku. The sound of steel clashing against steel rang out through the cavernous base. Currently Uchiha, who had been healed by Naruto using a medical jutsu which was far superior to everything but Orochimaru's techniques after she regained her powers in 10 hours because of feminine fury, was training against Naruto. But was fighting at Byakuya's level along with his complete Zanpakuto so that she would have experience fighting the captain of Squad 6. He had started by using Zaraki's style in Zanpakuto and was moving through each captain as she got to the point she could hold her own against them. In the meantime, in another section, one of Naruto's Kage Bushin was teaching Chad better fighting techniques to use with his giant fist. Currently he was working on teaching him a modified version of Tsunade's super strength based off of his sketchy memory of the technique. But Chad was picking the technique up quickly, he now just had to get it to where he could hold the power long enough to deliver a punch, and he would be ready for whatever Soul Society had to offer. Yuriko was being taught how to hit a moving target while dodging strikes from Naruto. She could now move at roughly third seat speed while dodging, and could pin a fly to a wall at 300 feet away. She only had to work on power for her shots, and she would be ready. Orochimaru was not left out of Naruto's training. He was teaching her basic self-defense moves that would be devastating when used right. For example, groin shots, headbutts, and elbow and knee strikes. She had initially been wary until Naruto showed her a genjutsu with what might happen if she was unprepared. After that she quickly and readily threw herself into the training. In Naruto's opinion, they would never be up to standard, but they would be able to survive at the least. That was Naruto's goal, ensure the team's survival and success of the operation. It was funny to him that even though this was not a military operation, such as his shinobi missions and Shinigami days, he still referred to this rescue as if a group of professionals would be doing it. But the chuckle the original went back to writing down the next of the Ichiha series that he had memorized and was publishing under the pen name Maelstrom. He had gotten quite wealthy over the years from the series. He was contemplating what to do if the rescue was successful, knowing that the only way for it to be successful was for Aizen's treachery to be revealed. He began to plan a forward operating base for Shinigami and the small group here to operate from, a sanctuary if you would from Hollows. Where they could do what they needed to do without worrying about interference or detection. He shook his head. These plans will only be relevant if we succeed. Day of departure to the Soul Society. Naruto was satisfied with the level that the 4 he trained had reached in the minimal amount of time he had to teach them in. Chad had improved a lot, not only could he perform Tsunade's strength technique perfectly, but he could also use a long-range variant of it, like his own personal Zero, if you want to think of it that way. Orochimaru was roughly intermediate level in MMA because of the different defensive moves that Naruto had taught her. Yuriko had reached lieutenant level speed and her accuracy and power had also increased. She could now penetrate and gut a main battle tank's armor from half a mile away. Uchiha showed the most improvement though. She could now take on Byakuya, Toshiro, and Zakari simultaneously and win. Fighting Aizen, Tausen, and Jin gave her some trouble, if only because Naruto used the abilities of the three to support each other. They were currently listening to Urahara's unnecessary and quite frankly dispiriting pep talk. Naruto quickly tossed a blunted kunai from Kapatora, which shut the bucket hat-wearing former captain, before he spoke up in a much more rousing pep talk. You all know what we are here to do, to save Rukia Kichiki from the idiocracy of the Central 46, whom are being manipulated by someone. Does who is manipulating them matter? No, it doesn't. What matters is if the Soul Society is ready for the massive fast kicking coming their way. We are going to roll over their pathetic attempts to stop us, we will crush their best beneath our boots, and then we are going to spill drinks all over their precious society. Do I make myself clear? And with one unified voice Chad, Orihime, Ichihime, Yuriko, and Yuruchi, who was disguised as a cat, spoke. Sir, yes sir. Naruto then turned with mirth clearly written on his face to the openly gaping Urahara. Now you can open the gate you bucket-hated baka. Urahara shook his head before opening the gate along with Tessai. As they entered they saw the cleaner ahead of them headed towards the Soul Society's entrance. Soul Society. West Gate. After they passed through they found themselves right outside the western gate. Before any of the others could move though Naruto approached the gate, only for a massive axe to swing down and almost take his head off, which he blocked with one finger, and connected to the massive axe, was an even more massive Shinigami with a fez on his head. Naruto sighed. Jidanbo, we both know I can kick your fast 10 ways without even moving from this spot. So do yourself a big fat favor and just let us pass or not interfere at all. But at any rate we are going through that goddamn symbol of the Central 46's arrogance. Jidanbo swallowed nervously. You know I cannot open the gate for you Naruto. You and your companions are intruders and it is my duty to stop you here. Naruto snorted. Well then bend down here so I can punch you to make it look like I cowed you before blowing the gate open. Jidanbo thought for a moment before doing as Naruto said, and as Naruto said he got punched in the face hard enough to knock the big guy out, but not leave lasting damage. Before Yuruchi could comment, more like lecture and or call an idiot, on Naruto being an idiot for knocking out the only way into the Soul Society he reached into his backpack. He then pulled a massive weapon from there that Chad recognized only because he played some Halo Online, as did a Spartan laser Naruto. The former lieutenant of 2nd Division grinned as he charged the weapon and then fired blowing the gate off its hinges in one hit while yelling. Honey, I'm home. On the other side of the now destroyed gate. Captain Jin Ichimura had his perpetual smile on as he neared the west gate and with good reason. Aizen's plans were proceeding according to plan, not only were the Central 46 out of the picture and they were giving the orders, but on top of that the Hagwoku was within their grasp. It was only due to his instincts that he managed to dodge the gate as it passed right where his head was. As he turned to the gate he saw the one person who could mess up their plans walking through the ruined gateway without a care in the world and 4 unknowns and a cat walking behind him. Jin's smile seemed to vanish when he saw them, but before he could activate his Zanpakuto Naruto spoke up. Jin, we both know that you can't stop us. So go tell whoever the tuck you report to that we are here and that I am personally calling out each and every captain to fight me. That sent shock waves through the others who came with him, but Jin nodded and Flash stepped as fast as he could to the captain's meeting to inform them of this challenge. Before any of Naruto's companions could speak Naruto said in a voice full of power. And so it begins. The other 12 captains of the 13 court guards were in another meeting when Jin arrived, his standard smile gone. As he compassed himself a bit he noticed that he had the eyes of all the other captains on him for his late arrival. In fact the only reason he was late was because he ran into his lieutenant, Kira Izuru, and told him what happened so he could inform his fellow lieutenants. As he was compassing himself enough to report in he took a look around at the assembled captains. Representing the 13th Division was Captain Jashira Yukitake, a one-time student of Yamamoto and wielder of one of the only double, meaning it splits in two when in Shikai, Zanpakuto, Sajo no Kodawari. From the Research and Development Unit, Aka 12th Division, came Captain Mayuri Kuritsuchi, a madman who created his own daughter and abused her for the slightest fault, a man that Jin despised above nearly everyone else in the 13 court guards. The Fighting 11's captain was also there. Kenpachi Zaraki, a monster of a man who got his current position by defeating the previous one in Mortal Kombat, almost put Mortal Kombat instead. He was also the only one without a Shikai. 10th Division's Toshiro Hitsugaya was another person Jin never got alone with, and neither did Naruto now that he thought back on it, because he was too serious, never lightening up, nor able to take a joke about his height and supposed age. The ninth's captain, a fellow conspirator under Aizen, Kanam Tausen, was a blind man of African descent, however his blindness did not hinder him in the least. The Kaiten Kayakatsu, the only other doubles Anpakudo in the Soul Society, was wielded by the captain of the 8th Division Shunsui Kairaku, someone that he could have gotten along with because of his easygoing nature, if not for Aizen's plan. 7th Division's Captain Sajin Kamamura was a massive at over 9 feet tall, with a complete helmet on his head, hiding his face from the world. 6th Division was in the hands of Captain Byakuya Kichiki, another no-nonsense person. Leading the 5th Division was the secret leader of the conspiracy he was a part of, the glasses-wearing Captain Sasuke-san. On charge of 4th Division, Aka the Medical Division, was Retsu Anohana. He himself commanded 3rd Division so no one was in his spot. 2nd Division was commanded by the Ice Queen of Soul Society, Soi-Fong, who earned that title by turning down any dates and generally being cold to everyone. The main reason for her change was Naruto and Uruchi's leaving Sirte. And finally, behind a desk which the 2 lines of other captains stood in front of was the Captain General himself, Yamamoto. An extremely old man, possibly the oldest in Soul Society, he wields power unrivaled by the other captains so far. Jin's smile reasserted itself quickly. That will all change once we have the Hagwoku, maybe if we're lucky Naruto will kill him for us. The future traitor then spoke in a tone that showed his concern over the news he had, but for a different reason than most assumed. I'm sorry I'm late, but I had an encounter with someone from the society's past, former lieutenant of the 2nd Division, Naruto Uzumaki. He is leading a group of 4 unknowns and a black cat of all things in an assault on the Sirte. That little announcement caused various reactions, some like the bastard Mayuri, who was panicking because the last time the two had met Naruto, had threatened to kill him if he abused his daughter anymore, and Zaraki, who was looking forward to a rematch, were entertaining. Others like Soi-Fong, who was pissed at Naruto and Uruchi for leaving her behind, and Yamamoto, who believed Naruto to be a traitor, were less amusing and scarier. But most of them were apathetic. However, he knew that the next bit of news would cause some chaos, something he personally loved. He also called all of us out for a massive battle. I would suggest brining our lieutenants for backup. That caused a predicted chaos, each captain shouting over the other and tossing about accusations, until Yamamoto took back control. Silence. As of this moment, all Soul Reapers are to be at war level preparation. All captains and lieutenants are to help defeat Naruto Uzumaki. If he believes he can stop the combined might of the Sirte, he is gravely mistaken. The group then followed the head captain as he headed to where Naruto's spiritual pressure was and had not moved, the execution hill. Among the group were 2 faces, one of which was following at a distance to remain hidden, that Naruto had not seen in a long time. They were Satsune Uchiha, current lieutenant of the 2nd Division, and Kurenai Yuuhi, 3rd seat of 2nd Division. When the large group of Shinigami arrived at Naruto's location, they found him sitting in a meditative posture on top of the scaffold, with his sword in his lap, and the gentle breeze that was blowing through the area, giving the scene a tranquil appearance. As they approached him settling into their battle stances, they felt 4 massive surges of spiritual pressure from the perimeter, and as they looked on a massive grey barrier formed. Naruto's head then snapped up, and he jumped from his position and landed on his feet without a sound. He then grinned and spoke in a mocking tone. I must admit I never thought such a simplistic ploy would catch the eyes of the best of the Sirte. I would have thought that my ploy to use myself as bait while my allies, all of whom are on par with a lieutenant at least, successfully rescued Rukia. At Byakuya and several others attempted to leave the barrier to stop his compatriots' attempt to rescue the flat-chested prisoner. Naruto chuckled. The barrier is unbreakable unless I let you out. At a nod from Yamamoto, the lieutenants charged Naruto, only to be stopped dead in their tracks when he unleashed a tenth of his pressure. The captains were also having trouble breathing, and Yamamoto was shocked that this brat had power on par with his own. Satsune and Kurenai were doing as well as the captains simply because of their training as ninja. Yamamoto growled before every captain began to activate their shikai, which caused Naruto to grin as their power rose. Meanwhile, the extraction group was halfway to the penitent cell. They all felt the massive power that was being released by the soon-to-be combatants, and both Uruchi and Uchiha worriedly though the same thing. You better survive this, you blonde dumbus. Naruto chuckled darkly as he felt the rise of spiritual pressure from the captain's shikais. The surrounding captains were wary of him only because of the power he was pouring out. They did think he was slightly insane, though to be chuckling like he was, a judgment that was reinforced when Naruto spoke. Yes, this is how it should be. A fight with no restraints. Just pure warriors fighting for dominance. Though 13 against 1 is a bit unfair, so to make it fair I won't use my Zanpakuto against you. That caused the entire group to go wide-eyed at this display of what they assumed was arrogance, but in fact was sportsmanship. Yamamoto spoke in his calm and powerful voice that also spoke of his age and wisdom. Such arrogance does not become you, Naruto. Naruto just chuckled. If you think I'm arrogant then you know nothing about me. Let me give you a refresher course. Before I died I was a member of a military force similar to the stealth force. I graduated the dead last of the academy due to the sabotage that the instructors threw at me. Over my brief 3-month career I took down an A-rank shinobi. Haku was technically as strong as Abusa, therefore he gets the same rank, and at my death, I took down an S-rank shinobi, Orochimaru. For those of you who don't understand the ranking system, an A rank is equivalent to a captain, and S rank is equivalent to Yamamoto. The Jutsu, or the art of hand-to-hand combat, was one of my specialties. So bring it. Insert BGM. Gundam Unicorn OST Track 13 Full Frontal. While Naruto's summary of his deeds while actually alive made the assembled Shinigami either nervous or reckless, depending on whether they believed him or not, that was all the encouragement that Kenpachi needed to charge his former sparring partner. As he swung his sword to decapitate Naruto, the blonde former shinobi ducked and delivered 4 punches to Kenpachi's arms, completely disabling them. The blonde then delivered a roundhouse kick to Kenpachi's chest, sending the battle-crazy berserker flying into the barrier where he slumped out cold. Naruto then dodged Mayuri's poisonous blade several times before Mayuri apparently stabbed him through the chest. However, instead of falling over dead, Naruto grabbed the madman's sword arm, preventing him from moving. He then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, but seemed to echo through the society. Boom. That caused everyone's eyes to widen, but it was too late for the trapped mad scientist. The detonation of the exploding clone completely vaporized him, leaving nothing to rebirth him. Then they heard a sinister chuckle fill the area that chilled the horrified captains to the bone. I told the bastard that if I ever caught up with him that he would die. I never imagined that he would be so stupid as to attack one of my exploding clones. That set off Yashiro and Kayakatsu, who began to double team him with their 4 swords. Naruto merely dodged the strikes and taunted them. Too slow. You missed me. Try again. What are you trying to do with those? Give me a haircut. High taunts enraged the 2 captains even more than the death of their colleague, and Naruto's callous reaction had, exactly as Naruto hoped. While the other captains watched shocked at the power that Naruto was displaying and hoping to wear him down through fighting small battles, merely watched, Retsu was making sure that Kenpachi's wounds were not life-threatening. The lieutenants were barely able to keep up with the speed the fight was going at and unable to do anything about it because of Naruto's immense pressure and decided to just talk. Unsurprising, it was Renji who brought up the subject that everyone was avoiding. I can't believe how easily Naruto beat Captain Kenpachi, and then to turn around and erase all traces of Captain Mayuri so easily. How the hell did we miss this? The Sirite has eyes everywhere, his growth should not have been so devastatingly effective. Equally unsurprising was the fact that it was Satsune who replied to Renji's question. I'm not all that surprised. Naruto always has been unpredictable. As he said, he graduated as the dead last of our academy year after 2 years of being held back, and the reason for that was that the teachers would sabotage him and he would have mobs after him if he did too well. Before any of you ask, I cannot tell you why. He swore me to secrecy while we were still alive. If you want to know why, you'll have to ask him. But before anyone else could speak, she continued. After the academy, when he started to receive training from someone who would train him willingly, he flourished. He quickly matched my strength and began to surpass it when he died, taking down that S-rank ninja. From what I could gather about his time here, he grew exponentially simply because he had willing trainers. That and he spared with Captain Kenpachi. That caused shock to reverberate through the group of lieutenants, something that was not helped when Yuichiro confirmed it. It's true. Kenny and Fishy used to play all the time before Fishy left. Initially Kenny always won. But as time passed, more often than not Fishy would either force a tie or win. I'll bet that Fishy has been getting stronger during his leave so he could give Kenny a good fight. However, they were even more shocked when Jashiro and Kayakatsu went flying backwards with their Zanpakuto broken in their hands and numerous broken bones. Nanao, Keen, one of the 2/3 seats of Squad 13, and Sentaro, the other 3rd seat for Squad 13, were especially horrified to see the state that those 2 well-respected captains were in, mainly because they were in those 2's divisions. Nemu had been deeply affected by the death of her father, but it was in a positive way, since now she no longer had to worry about abuse. Naruto's cold voice broke through the horror that had settled on the proceedings. Pathetic. Is this all the might and fury that Soul Society has to offer? Where is the fire with which you fought while I was still a member of your ridiculous farce of a military? You have clearly forgotten the humility as well as the necessity to grow stronger that comes from being a Shinigami. Something that you shall be reminded of when I defeat all of you. NBGM. Play. Samurai Deeper Kaio 25 Decision. Then the remaining captains, except for Retsu, Yamamoto, Aizen and Jin, charged Naruto. Naruto ducked under a swing from Kamameru, spun around a strike from Toshiro, and blocked Tausen's strike with his pinky finger before flash stepping away from Soi-Fong's strike. When he reappeared, he was back on the scaffold and had tilted his head as if listening to the wind. He then spoke in a contemplative voice. You say that they are worthy, very well then. With a deliberately slow motion he unsheathed on him. He then spoke in a cold and emotionless tone that still managed to convey bloodlust. Destroy all in your path on him. The last part came out as a roar and his spiritual pressure doubled, however the pressure was much more focused on only Naruto, thus it didn't affect the lieutenants. A massive flash of light also occurred, blinding everyone. When the light faded, Naruto was no longer clad in his normal uniform, he was instead clad in partial red samurai armor and a torn white trench coat. His actual physical appearance also changed a small amount. He now had burning red eyes and blood red hair. When he spoke now there was a more noticeable bloodlust in his tone, but it was still calm and collected. Feel privileged that you have gained the notice of the Crimson King, Anam no Kyo, one of the greatest of the samurai from period of the Warring States. Know that there is no way for you to achieve victory. Tausen then activated his Bankai and its ability without the invocation. As expected, the all-encompassing darkness stripped Naruto of all his senses, but not the captains he was fighting. And as such they charged him in a belief that they could defeat him. But instead what happened was that Naruto spoke in a powerful voice. Mumyojin Purayu Satsujin Ken. Mizuchi. As soon as Naruto finished announcing his attack, a massive crimson ring of air and water, if you looked closely you could see the numerous blades of wind or water that made up the technique instead of the ring, went from him and stopped just short of the lieutenants. When the smoke from the power release disappeared, all except Naruto and Tausen were on the ground bleeding from numerous crippling wounds that if left untended could be fatal. However, that was the external looks. Inside Tausen's mind he was fighting against Naruto's will with his own, and losing. Every time he thought he had killed Naruto it was in fact a copy of his own will. He was tired from fighting all out, and it was then that Naruto struck. Mizuchi is not just a blade of water and air, it controls the very blood in your body. Tausen gasped as he felt a warmth fill his whole body. What is this warmth? Naruto smiled serenely. You heard it too, didn't you? The voice of the divine wind. Outside of Tausen's mind his body began to expand before exploding in a violent shower of blood, gore, and bones. An event that horrified everyone, but the two surviving conspirators were even more horrified because the only reason for him to have killed Tausen was that he knew that Tausen was a part of the plot. Yamamoto then walked forward with his cane staff, and as he did he spoke aloud as his staff turned into his Zanpakuto. You have decimated the Soul Society, but now you face me. Yamamoto then walked forward with his cane, and as he did he spoke aloud as his staff turned into his Zanpakuto. You have decimated the Soul Society, but now you face me. The old man's declaration challenge caused Naruto to grin an extremely bloodthirsty grin. Well, come on then, old man. Let's see how you stack up against my power. Play Devil May Cry 3 Ost Virgil Battle 1, Extended Version. The two Shinigami charged each other at nearly unimaginable speed, well to most, but to a certain traitor, they were moving well within his abilities to see, but he assumed that Naruto was holding back, and that scared him more than he cared to admit. Jin spoke in a whisper to his fellow captain and leader of the conspiracy. It's very scary, isn't it, Captain Aizen? Those two are fighting on equal terms, and Naruto doesn't seem to be using his full might. Aizen merely nodded as the two greatest threats to his plans clashed. Naruto would go for a horizontal swing only to be blocked and then forced to block Yamamoto's counterattack. It went on like that for some time, one would attempt to attack only to be blocked and countered, but all the while their sword strikes were getting faster and faster. One mistake and one of the two fighters could be either crippled permanently or killed, even Yuichiro could see that the two were aiming to end the other's life. Infiltration Team. Penitent Cell. The other members of Naruto's group had made it to the cell with minor difficulties, mostly in the form of third seats and lesser-seated officers that attempted to stop them. Once they got in though they were in for a shock, one of the cords that held Ichiham's Zanpakuto jumped off her and turned into Naruto. Who soon revealed that he was a shadow clone, who after checking Rukia, who was still in her cell with no guards, realized that it was an illusion. See Naruto that dispelled so Naruto would know, but not before telling the group to head for the execution hill. Central 46 Chambers. Same time. At the same time a clone of Setsune and Soi-Fong were examining the scene of a massacre. The entire Central 46 had been slaughtered and left in various states of dismemberment. Most were missing limbs or heads, others only had giant gashes, and long dried blood stained the walls, floor and ceiling. However, there was no evidence to point to a culprit. At that point a team, 4, of Naruto shadow clones walked through the door. The lead clone spoke with a slightly annoyed voice. Damn, and here I was hoping to get some answers from the beep suckers as to why they reacted so strongly to Kisuke's antics without taking into account the evidence that had been gathered. Soi-Fong and Setsune watched cautiously as the team of Naruto clones began their own investigation of the scene. Soi-Fong, however, broke the silence. What the hell are you doing here? Did you kill them? The leader of the team snorted. Please, we haven't been here long enough for the boss to kill these little bastards. However, if you paid attention when I taught you forensics, then you would know that these bastards have been dead for at least a month. This froze the 2nd Division Shinigami. If they've been dead that long, then who the hell has been giving orders using their authority? We've been played like fools. One of the other Naruto clones then spoke up. Boss, it seems that Aizen and his accomplices are behind this. The leader of the small team leader nodded. Figures better let the boss know. Execution Hill. The head captain and Naruto were currently at a break and having a stare-off. Yamamoto had numerous small cuts where he barely managed to block or dodge Naruto's attacks. He was also breathing slightly heavier than usual. Naruto had fewer cuts than Yamamoto and was breathing the same as he usually did. Yamamoto then spoke in his normal tone of voice. I must admit that I have underestimated your strength, Uzumaki. But no longer. Reduce all creation to ash. Rikinjaka. At the captain commander's incantation, his katana becked me a large Chinese-style straight sword and a wave of fire swept towards Naruto. Naruto didn't even bother to try and dodge the attack, and with good reason. The flames, when they tried to consume him, did nothing. It was as if the flames were non-existent. Naruto countered with a vertical slice that damaged Yamamoto's cloak but did nothing else. Yamamoto decided to try to talk to see if there was some way to end this. Uzumaki, why have you returned to the Sirte? What is your purpose here? Naruto chuckled. My purpose here? It is to show you the hypocrisy that infests the whole of this rotten institution. I came to save someone from an unjust fate. I came to kill that bastard Mayuri. I can't stand people who abuse their family members. I came to see if there were traitors among the Soul Society. But above all, I came because it was the right thing to do. Imoto frowned slightly at this. You are an incredible foe, Uzumaki, but know this. Raijin Jaka has control over every kind of flame in existence. As he said this, black flames gathered around him and he continued. Behold the flames of hell, or as you shinobi know it, Amitsura. These flames will not be extinguished until you die. Naruto stood unflinchingly as the flames approached him. He then closed his eyes and spoke in a soft tone. Mumyojin Puryuaugi Suzaku. As he spoke, his body began to disappear until nothing was left. At that point, a massive phoenix the size of the Sujoku appeared in Naruto's place. It then flew at Yamamoto with speed that far surpassed that which most Shinigami could see. But Yamamoto countered with his hellfire, which seemed to burn Naruto's technique. This turn of events horrified several Shinigami in the group, most notably Satsune and Soi-Fong, but most of the females were also affected. When it seemed obvious that Naruto's attack had failed and he was dead, Yamamoto turned and started to walk away. However, as Yamamoto turned away, Naruto's powerful voice filled the area. Fool. When Yamamoto turned to see where it was coming from, he, along with everyone there, was shocked to see that Suzaku was coming in for another attack. Yamamoto voiced the thoughts of everyone there when he said. How? I destroyed that attack. Naruto's amused voice answered him, but at the same time it sounded a bit off. Suzaku is a phoenix and will rise again and again, even if burned down by the very flames of hell. Yamamoto raised Raijin to block but was unable to defend himself in time. The phoenix passed through him and on the other side turned into Naruto with his sword ready to be sheathed. His voice broke through the eerie silence that had descended on the surrounding Shinigami. You felt it too, didn't you? Suzaku's breath. Yamamoto then collapses with a large gash in his chest from Naruto's Shikai. It was then that a message was transmitted by Soi-Fong's clone. Attention all members of the Soul Society. Captain Aizen along with Captains Ichimura Jin and Kanem Tausen have killed the Central 46. All Shinigami are to kill or capture the traitors. At that moment Aizen made his move. He quickly disappeared and he appeared right in front of Yamamoto. I cannot pass up this opportunity. And with that he severed Yamamoto's head from his shoulders. He then dodged the dozens of Kido spells launched his way by the captains and lieutenants before speaking. Now, wouldn't want to harm Mrs. Kichiki now, do you? As he said that he held out his hand and Rukia appeared in it, still clad in her white kimono. Naruto snarled. You talking coward. You won't get away with this. Aizen merely smiled serenely. Oh, but I already have. Watch as my plan comes to fruition. As he spoke he removed his glasses and slicked his hair back before continuing. All these years of hiding my true nature, manipulating the Central 46, getting that fool Uchiha banished, and creating my army in Hueco Mundo. It all comes down to this. He then dropped his glasses and shoved his arm into Rukia's chest, and when he withdrew it out came the Hagwoku, but leaving Rukia relatively unharmed. And with this my dream of ruling all can become a reality. He then stomped on his no longer necessary glasses. But before any of the still loyal to Soul Society Shinigami could move, the two traitors were encased in the glowing yellow light of a negation. As the two traitors were lifted skywards, Naruto muttered under his breath a simple command that froze the blood of those present. Bankai. When that command was given, Naruto's spiritual pressure doubled yet again, causing a massive explosion that blocked him from everyone's sight. But when the smoke cleared, Naruto looked completely different. He now had swept back silver hair, a blue long coat with 3 tails and a snake-like pattern on the right side of the jacket. Under it was a dark blue vest and dark blue pants. He also had brown combat boots, his icy blue eyes were back, and his sword had changed to a majestic-looking katana. He then spoke in a tone more suitable for a laid-back Byakuya. Enma katana. Yamato, devil blade. Yamato. And with a flick of his wrist he severed Aizen's right arm and Jin's left arm, however they still escaped to Hueco Mundo. At that point the rest of the rescue Rukia group arrived, as did the majority of Squad 4. However, they were frozen in shock looking at Naruto, who they turned around and spoke with a slightly irritated tone. "The hell are you looking at? Don't you Squad 4 members have a job to do?" Naruto sat in the captain commander's chair with his feet propped up on the desk and a traveling samurai straw hat on his head to hide his face. Also in the room were the surviving loyal captains, the temporary captain of 12th Division Nemu, and Naruto's allies from the human world. Naruto had forced them to wait for an extra hour after they were supposed to be there by napping. In fact, he was still asleep. It was right before Soi-Fong, or one of the other captains, lost their temper and attacked him that a shadow clone of Naruto walked in. The clone then whispered something in the original's ear before placing 2 scrolls in his hands and dispelling. Without even a word, Naruto got up out of the chair, walked to the center of the room, and threw one of the scrolls down. He then flew through a strange set of hand signs before slamming his hand into the ground and shouting. Summoning Jutsu. Resurrection of the Warrior. 1. Everyone froze as a smoke cloud rose where the scroll had been just a second ago. All the captains tensed as they felt the weight of the spiritual pressure called back into existence by Naruto's jutsu, and as the smoke cleared the group felt their jaws take residence on the floor. For standing tall where the scroll was, now stood Yamamoto, alive and unharmed. Many of the captains were shocked, but none more so than the recently resurrected commander of the 13 court guards. Something he made abundantly clear to Naruto's amusement when he opened his mouth. How? Why? Who? Explain. Naruto started to chuckle before responding. It's very simple, Yamamoto-san. Soul Society is at war now. Aizen betrayed you and has an army in Hueco Mundo. My best guess is that we have at the most a month. However, if you're asking why I chose to revive you with the technique I just used, well, it's quite simple. Soul Society would probably fare better under the care of the one who had led it for millennia than under the care of anyone else. Here Naruto paused to put a toothpick in his mouth before continuing. Besides, I just can't stand Aizen having something to boast about. He has tried too many times to step above his station in life. With that, he tossed his toothpick at the ground, causing it to be buried within the floor. He then took his spot slightly in front of his allies from the human world, the traditional spot for a guardian to take. From there the meeting proceeded as it normally would. Yamamoto received reports, requests, and small problems from the captains of the divisions, all of which he handled well for a previously deceased man. It was after the standard stuff was out of the way that the 2 things Naruto was waiting to be brought up were. It was Kenpachi who brought it up. As he did, Naruto mused to himself. I knew I could count on him to bring up the subject. After all, he's a battle-crazed berserker, but besides that, he's one of my few reliable friends. I know that if we had spared before that fight on the hill, he would have backed me up. After all, as he explained to me, he is only loyal to those who are warriors. Sir, what about the infiltrators and Naruto? What is our stance towards our guests? Also, Uzumaki, I have a question for you. How did you become so much stronger? I know none of us have been slacking off in our own abilities, so how were you able to demolish us so easily? The other captains and their commander were shocked at Kenpachi's attitude during his questions. After all, they had never seen Kenpachi's serious-eyed, they had only been allowed to see the berserker. Yamamoto thought for a minute. The ease with which the blonde former lieutenant of 2nd Division had demolished the best of the Soul Society was still fresh in his mind. He then spoke with as normal a voice he could summon. The humans were here for the sole purpose of rescuing Mrs. Kachiki, therefore they are not our enemy. Naruto is definitely not our enemy, and if he was, we couldn't afford to fight him anyways, since if I'm not mistaken you were holding back a great deal of power. The captains nodded to show that they understood what Yamamoto was saying, and then turned to Naruto to hear his answer to Kenpachi's question. It's actually rather simple. While you may have trained and improved yourselves, it was only as much as was needed to deal with maybe the occasional Mino's Grand, because Aizen held back his most powerful. However, I on the other hand would lock myself in Hueco Mundo for a decade every 50 years for combat survival recon training and as a measuring stick for how far I had come. If you don't understand, then I'll make it even easier. I had a greater reason to grow stronger than you did, it's just that simple. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked around and saw looks of shock and admiration on the faces of the Shinigami assembled. He couldn't help but chuckle. It was then that a thought struck him, one that was too good not to voice. Yamamoto-san, is it possible for me to get permission to form a first response team in the land of the living? After all, it stands to reason that Aizen will strike there first to increase the power of his army before attacking the Sirte. Yamamoto thought for a second before answering. Yes, you may. However, I have two conditions. The first is that you find a more permanent replacement for Captain Mayuri, as good as Lieutenant Nemu as she is not yet at the level of her father. The other is that you submit a list for my approval of who you want on your team. Naruto nodded before speaking. Easy enough, I should be able to finish both conditions by the end of this week. Surprisingly enough, Naruto was able to finish both conditions in 2 days, and even more surprising was that the first was easier to fulfill than the second. But it still took a lot less time than expected to get both done. As such, 2 days later, Naruto walked into the captain's meeting with a scroll and a hooded figure, whose identity was hidden from the captains, behind him. Naruto grinned as he handed the list to Yamamoto and spoke with a lazy drawl. There's the list you requested, old man. As for the replacement, he's behind me, however I need everyone in this room to swear not to attack him until I explain everything, or I'll just go Bankai, kill all of you, and then resurrect you again when I'm sure you are more reasonable. The captains quickly submitted to Naruto's barely hidden threat. As soon as they did so, the hooded man removed the hood, revealing the well-known face of Kisuke Urahara. The reveal almost caused the captains to attack Urahara, but a warning hand on him caused them to restrain themselves. Yamamoto, who had a bit more tact than everyone else there, decided to get the question out of the way. Uzumaki, why have you brought this criminal here before us? I doubt that it is for the captain's position of Squad 12. Naruto began to grin manically. Now whoever said that the man behind me is a criminal? At that, Soi-Fong, still annoyed at Urahara and slightly less at Naruto, spat out the answer. The Central 46. At this, Naruto's grin, which was already freaking out some of the captains, grew to Kenpachi level. And who has Aizen been manipulating all this time? At this, the eyes of nearly everyone in the room widened in shock, and Naruto decided to pour some salt on the wound. That's right, everyone's favorite traitor, Aizen Sasuke. His Zanpakuto allows him to control the senses of those that see his Shikai's release, not the bullshit ability he fed all of you. As soon as he finished speaking, Yamamoto shakily opened the list. He wasn't sure how many more shocks he could take, but not before confirming that Urahara was now the captain of Squad 12, again. As he read the list, the old man felt his eyes widening from shock at the list that Naruto had presented him with. However, after taking a breath, he decided to see what Naruto's reasoning was behind the list before rejecting it. An interesting list, Uzumaki, but before I decided one way or the other, can you tell me your reasoning? Naruto pulled out another toothpick and started to maul it using his molars while speaking. Simple enough. I requested Kurenai and Satsune because they were both shinobi, much like I was, so they know how to perform stealth operations, as well as the fact that I worked with both of them. Satsune more than Kurenai makes it easier for teamwork. I requested Nemu Kuretsuchi because the team will need a scientist to beepize our foes as soon as possible, instead of waiting for reports to be beepized. Aizen is on my list of members because we need a medic. The team can have all the power in the world, but if we can't heal, then we can be overwhelmed. Yamamoto nodded to show he understood Naruto's reasoning so far. He then spoke again. That answers some of my questions, but what about the last few names, Soi-Fong, Ranjiku Matsumoto, and Yorichi Shihinen? Here the captains all looked at Naruto like he was an idiot to request that those three be included, Toshiro's legendary overprotectiveness and Soi-Fong's Ice Queen personality being the primary reason behind their thoughts. But if they knew of what was going through the two captains' heads, they would go running for the hills, especially Soi-Fong's, which were XXX rated. As soon as her fantasies got too far off the deep end, she rocketed back with a nosebleed, causing many of the captains to panic. After all, the Ice Queen just had a perverted thought, therefore the end was near. Naruto simply beeped an eyebrow before speaking. I thought she would have gotten over her fantasy of a three-way between her, me, and Yorichi. Guess I was wrong. At that, Kenpachi started laughing in his usual half-maniacal way, causing most of the captains to draw back with a great deal of unease, but Naruto just chuckled at his friend's antics. The sight of Sarate's Berserker and True Warrior laughing in sync was enough to get Yamamoto to approve of the list without getting Naruto's answer or looking further down to see the final members of the first strike team. Whether or not he would regret that was up for debate, but for now his sole concern was surviving the three monsters the Spirit King decided to curse him with. Kenpachi Zaraki, Naruto Uzumaki, and paperwork. 3 days later. Land of the Living, Karakura Town. The newly formed first reaction team exited the portal the Urahara created for them that linked directly into his shop. The team was formed of several Shinigami, Kurenai Yuuhi, Satsune Uchiha, Nemu Kuretsuchi, Aizen Katetsu, Ranjiku Matsumoto, and Soi-Fong, a former Shinigami, Yorichi, and several spiritually aware humans, Quincy substitute Shinigami. Orochimaru, Tatsuki Chad, Yuriko, and Ichihime. And they were all under the command of the grinning blonde maniac in the lead, none other than Naruto Uzumaki. It had been a few days since Naruto's death, and he was currently in a straitjacket being dragged to the Shinigami Academy by a petite girl dressed like a generic Kinuchi, who had a short sword attached to the small of her back. The girl obviously thought that Naruto was unable to do anything to escape his current predicament. But she had underestimated him. A single half-hand sign later and in his place was a log with a crudely drawn version of his face on it. As soon as he was free of the straitjacket he took off running, he would not go to school again, damn it. As for the young woman, one Soi-Fong, if his memory served him well enough, is what Orochi called her, carried on for a while, but then when she realized that her captive had gotten heavier, she discovered his escape. As such he quickly set off in pursuit. However, Naruto had the advantage, mostly because if the substitution jutsu worked then, so would the shadow clone jutsu. Something he discovered when he created a group of over 1,000 shadow clones, which split up to gather information so he could make his own decision, as well as to throw Soi-Fong off his trail. As soon as his clones split up, Soi-Fong froze in shock. There was no way she would be able to find the blonde by herself, so with that in mind, she went to the 2nd Division to recruit them in her hunt. So while Orochi's bodyguard got reinforcements to assist her chase of his clones, our recently deceased friend went to a local ramen stand to eat and think. 2 hours later an angry Soi-Fong finally found him. By then he had finished 20 bowls of ramen, gone over all the information he was given by his clones dispelling, and had finally accepted that he had no choice but to learn how to control his new powers, since there was no other way for him to even see his friends again, except through the Shinigami core. So as Soi-Fong entered the stand, Naruto got to his feet with a sigh before speaking. "I apologize for the trouble I put you and your allies through to find me. I just needed to think my path through, instead of being forced onto a path I didn't want to follow." As soon as he finished speaking he walked out of the stand and gestured for Soi-Fong to follow him, which she did with some hesitance as well as annoyance. After all, she wasn't his pet dog or something like that, damn it. After a while the two found themselves atop the execution hill as the sun set. Soi-Fong was in shock at the sheer beauty that filled the Sarate from where they were standing. Naruto's reaction was a chuckle. It seemed no matter where he went, he was always able to find the perfect spot to watch the sunset. Unbeknownst to the two, who were deeply wrapped in their own thoughts, the combination of the Sujoku's normally peaceful spiritual pressure and the sunset, their bodies were inching closer to one another. Soon enough they were a second away from kissing when a highly amused female voice broke their traces. Well, don't you move fast, Soi-Fong. He's only been here 1 day and you're already trying to claim him. My little bee's all grown up. That was enough to cause both of the young souls to jump apart and glare at the chocolate-skinned Taicho, who merely gained a Cheshire grin before speaking again. Although, if you want to go further then you should find a room, unless you're a voyeur. That caused the two mortally embarrassed souls to grasp their Zanpakuto in their embarrassment and rage, before they started to chase Orochi around the Soul Society, always just a little behind her the whole time, the purple-haired captain laughing the whole time. Unknown to the three involved, that one incident formed a bond between them that would serve them in good stead in the times to come. But that was far in the future and Naruto still had to attend the academy. The next day. Beginning of academy. This part is more of a summary of events, sorry about that, but I can't think of a better way to cover the first day after writing the humor scene. The next day when he was finally brought to the academy, Naruto was extremely guarded. After all, his previous experience with academies, especially ones for training military forces, was one of hindrance and sabotage. So until he knew he would be treated fairly he was going to remain in the middle of the class ranking-wise. However, that plan was shot to hell when he saw who his instructor was, the demon of the mist, Zabuza Mamachi, with his standard garb and giant head cleaver strapped to his back. He was intimidating, as when Naruto first encountered him. The presence of one of the few that had seen his true power destroyed all chance of laying low, especially when Zabuza swore that if they didn't reach their full potential, he would go on a killing spree among those who were worthless in his eyes. With Zabuza's comment as motivation, Naruto pushed himself to excel and get away from the former missing nin. Due to the presence of Zabuza, Naruto was forced to put his best effort into his training. However, his best effort brought him to the eyes of the captains of the guard, mostly because he had been advanced several times due to being a prodigy. In fact, at this very moment he was in the graduating class, 50 years before he was supposed to be, and waiting for the written test to finish so they could move on to the practical portion, where the class would be sent on a mock hollow hunt on an abandoned oil rig. Seeing as how he had already finished his test, Naruto let his mind wander a bit as he recalled how much things had changed for him now that he was dead. For starters, his social standing had really changed. He was no longer the hated and feared Jinchuriki who had to work hard to even get one friend, let alone two, Kurenai and Satsune, to a beloved prodigy whose list of friends included Soi-Fong, Orochi. And a couple of his classmates, most notably Ranjiku and Isane, both of whom had been specially selected to ascend to the rank of lieutenant in the 10th and 4th division respectively. Power-wise he had grown by leaps and bounds, where once was a below adequately trained genin who relied more on luck than actual skill, there now was a Shinigami who was closer to the level of a lieutenant than the wet behind the ears academy student he was supposed to be. He also had begun to do some extra training under his 3 Zanpakuto spirits to learn the basics of their basic forms. He had few ambitions though, except to keep his abilities as secretive as possible. However, unknown to him, his already astonishing stealth abilities, as well as the few abilities that Soi-Fong had managed to discover for her mistress, had singled him out for the stealth force. In fact, Uruchi had made a point of bragging to her fellow captains about the fact that she basically had the perfect stealth force member about to graduate from the academy. However, before Naruto could contemplate what that boast did to his life, the graduating class was called to the portal to the derrick, where the practical part of the exam would take place, as well as an unforeseen event. Abandoned oil derrick. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean. As the would-be Shinigami exited the portal's, Abusa's voice broke the semi-silence that was part of the derrick's usual atmosphere. "Alright brats, you have a half an hour to scout out the area before I use a minuscule amount of hollow bait to draw on a bunch of the weaklings for you to practice against. Whoever can defeat 2 or more will become a Shinigami, the rest will be dropped back into the academy for another couple of years to hone their skills. Any questions?" But none of the Shinigami hopefuls spoke up. Abusa grinned fierily underneath his bandages. "But get to work, Gakkus, you have less than a half an hour left. But I might decide to activate the bait at any time if I get too bored waiting." At that, most of the Shinigami scattered to get good positions to fight from, all except Naruto and his 2 friends, who had previously agreed to work together to ensure their passing. The small group of 3 merely moved into the center of the rig and waited for the inevitable assault by the hollows. They didn't have long to wait, soon enough the air was thick with hundreds of weak hollows, with more arriving each second. It was a slaughter. By the time the exam was scheduled to end, every hopeful had gotten at least 3 confirmed cleansings in their tally. However, soon enough things changed, mainly because a second more potent hollow bait was activated and dozens of more powerful hollows emerged from their portals and descended on the weakened academy students, all the while Soul Society scrambled reinforcements. By the time the senior Shinigami arrived though, it was too late for most of the academy graduates, who were barely at 50% when the new hollows arrived. As a result, most of the derrick was covered in the dead forms of the academy students, with the hollows vanishing mere seconds before they arrived. However much of a disaster the slaying of an entire class could be, the fact remains that it showed the flaws in the academy's teaching course, as well as showed who were the strongest, obviously the ones who were still alive. Shinigami Academy. 2 days later. It was a silent room when Zabuza entered with the team assignments. Most of the survivors of the massacre were shaken to their cores by what had happened. However, much to Zabuza's well-hidden approval, Naruto and a few others were handling it better than most. If the former Kiri missing nin had to wager a guess, the only reason that they were holding together was either due to shinobi training or Naruto's influence respectively. He quickly shook his head to prevent himself from musing much longer. "Alright Shinigami, I hold in my hand your assignments. If you have any problems with your assigned division, take it up with your captain, because they requested you specifically. When I call your name and your division you can leave or stay, I personally don't care." After listing off a dozen worthless Shinigami that only survived because they were well hidden or in a large group, Zabuza came to the 3 who survived due to skill. "Isane Katetsu, you've been assigned to 4th division. As a warning, stay away from the 11th, they have a habit of picking fights with anyone that breathes. Ranjiku Matsumoto, 10th division, do us all a favor and try and get Pipsqueak to lighten up, will you? Naruto Uzumaki, you've been drafted to the 2nd division, lucky guy aren't you? After all, the 2nd is basically a parallel to our former World Shinobi Corps. Class dismissed." Over the past 50 years since Naruto's recruitment into the 2nd division, he had undergone a meteoric rise through the unit. From a lowly unseated Shinigami, he rose to 6th seat, and from there he eventually rose to the position of lieutenant of his division, just barely eating out Soi-Fong for the position. After rising to that rank, he quickly developed a reputation as the 2nd division's fixer. If a hollow or any other threat needed to be eliminated swiftly and silently, he was the one to call. As such, he was in constant demand for delicate and highly secretive missions. Some of which resulted in the entire annihilation of sections of Wakamundo due to massive bombs that worked using the same energy as a Shinigami Zanpakuto. These missions, along with his constant and unfailing record of success, practically earmarked him as the next captain of the division. As such, several captains took it upon themselves to ensure he was strong enough for the position. Chief among them were Yuruchi Kisuke and Kenpachi. Unsurprisingly, because of this, Naruto's schedule became even more hectic. As such, between the missions, his duties as a lieutenant, the extra training he was being given, and working on attaining Shikai with Kapatora, he had next to no time to hang out with his close friends. He had promised himself that once his sadistic trainers decided that they had trained him enough that he would catch up with them. As a result of the training, however, his personality and fighting style changed from the stealthy fixer to the true warrior. Despite this change, he seemed destined to take over the 2nd Division, but that all changed 100 years ago, the same time that Aizen's plan began to take fruit. Several high-ranking Shinigami had been infected by hollow-like abilities mysteriously, and the only suspect that the Central 46 had was Kisuke Urahara. As such, they detained. However, the decision was taken from their hands when Naruto and Orochi busted him and the afflicted captains out. While Orochi escorted Kisuke and the afflicted former members of the guard, Naruto decided to strike against the one behind it all, according to the Vizards and Kisuke, Sasuke-san. As such, the blonde employed his stealth skills to sneak into the 5th Division. His goal was simple: force a confession from the alleged traitor in such a way as to ensure there would be no way for him to escape punishment. However, he ran into unexpected interference in the form of a group of unusually Shinigami, clad in white versions of the normal uniform with hoods that completely obscured their features. Well, this was not unheard of, as some clan Shinigami were clad variations of the standard uniform. Aizen was not a clan member. This cast Aizen in a troubling light to Naruto. Normally Naruto would have been a match for any Shinigami, however these ones fought in a completely different way from normal Shinigami, and fought using different techniques too, ones that seemed similar to the ones high-ranking Hollows used. Because of this, and the fact that he was outnumbered 12-1, he was forced to flee. However, before he did, he managed to catch a glimpse of the only female in the group. Said woman had green hair and what looked like a skull with horns atop her head, almost like a macabre helmet. Plus, on the whole, she was really hot. Not going into that much detail, cause you should know who she is. If you don't, then shame on you for not recognizing her, something Anam agreed with. World of the living. Future side of Urahara candy store. Naruto walked out of the gate to find his fellow fugitives taking a breather and waiting for him. After Kisuke asked what happened, he told them everything relevant about his failed assassination attempt, including the strange Shinigamis whom Urahara theorized were the reverse of the partially hollow-feed Shinigami. That understandably caused shock among the banished, both forced and voluntary, Shinigami. Naruto, however, took this with a grain of salt. Since Aizen would probably want to keep his prototypes hidden, they would probably not grow too much stronger until the bastard made his move against Soul Society. As such, Naruto knew that he had plenty of time to master his abilities and crush Aizen's army. So the group split into 3, the Vizards to find a place to gain complete control over their new hollow abilities. Urahara and Orochi went to the city council to get control of the area they arrived at. Naruto, on the other hand, left to train with the spirits of his Zanpakuto and master the abilities locked within them. But each group had one thing in common: they swore that when Aizen made his move they'd be ready. But unknown to everyone, when Naruto made his oath, he drew his true power to the surface, a power that the 3 souls within his blades knew of and would give him the keys to use that ability when the time came. The hidden royal palace of the Spirit King. In the throne room of the massive palace sat a solitary figure clad in a silver and gold version of the normal Shinigami robe. He was a relatively old-looking man, say around late 50s early 60s, and except for the raven black hair that reached to his mid-back, he looked like an older version of Naruto. Another difference was his Zanpakuto. He only had one. It was a simple katana in a red sheath with red wrappings around the handle. The old man smiled as he spoke. "It seems my heir has started to summon to his true power. Hurry up and succeed me so I can retire. I can't handle the paperwork anymore." After the near-disastrous trip to Soul Society, because Rukia nearly died and Yamamoto did die but was brought back to life, we find Naruto in his Gigai, heading for the mayor of Karakura Town's office. Why was he going there, you may ask? Well, the answer is quite simple. While Urahara's shop had enough room for setting up a base, Naruto didn't want to owe the bucket hat wearer another favor. As such, he was going to talk to Mayor, who was actually an agent of Soul Society, about getting somewhere to set up a base. After waiting a half an hour in the mayor's waiting room, he was allowed to go in, and to his surprise, he came face to face with Hiruzen Sarutobi. The old man greeted him warmly, and after catching up for half an hour, the two got down to work about what had brought Naruto there. As it turned out, there was a perfect location in the list of properties the police had confiscated from gangs that had attempted to branch out into organized crime. The property in question had, at one point, been nothing more than a rundown factory complex. However, the gang members had changed it into a perfect base for covert activities. Everyone has their own opinions, so just picture what you think the interior should look like, such as the type that the first response group would have to undertake. Naruto had tried to pay for the property using the money he had amassed from republishing the Uchiha series. Can't have a Naruto story without at least one reference to it, now can we? However, Hiruzen declined, stating that they had been trying to get rid of that property for 20 years, and as such the city could afford to let it go for free. After talking for a little while longer, Naruto left, but not before asking why he didn't just use shadow clones to do the paperwork. This resulted in the Sandemi doing 3 things. First, he beat his head against his desk for 2 minutes while repeatedly saying baka. Next, he handed Naruto an honorary police badge, which gave him a lot more freedom when the law was concerned, and finally he handed Naruto a check for $20,000 for finally defeating the bane of all leaders. Hueco Mundo. Aizen's palace. Meanwhile, the idiot with a god complex and his remaining followers were plotting various things, while Aizen was planning, and everyone else was just waiting for him to start speaking. And when he did, he revealed that the reason he had been in isolation was to see if there was a way to regain his arm and Jin's as well. As it turned out, the Hijyoku would be able to do that as soon as it recharged from finishing the Espada's transformations into perfect rancor. To that end, Aizen had to work on getting the Hijyoku back up and running as fast as possible. In the meantime, he gave the Espada free rein to do as they liked, whether it be to train, experiment or whatever. This newfound temporary freedom gave the Espada time to boost their power up to whatever level they felt was appropriate for their rank or own opinions. Hell. Ninth Circle. Deep within the bowls of the pits of hell, several figures were casually talking about different ways to escape hell altogether, and they had come up with a few. However, the only one that made any sense and would prevent evil old Mundus or one of his generals from tracking them down would be to take over one of the other realms. Heaven's military was too strong for the group to overwhelm, and even then they would have to deal with the creator if they did defeat the armies of heaven. Soul Society was a definite possibility, seeing as how their ruler was shut away within a pocket dimension within the center of the Sirte. However, they were well armed and organized. Hueco Mundo was a stronger possibility, but Aizen and his minions being there complicated matters to the point where they would need to wage a war against the entirety of the Hollow race. And finally, they could try and take over Earth. However, every single faction had an interest in Earth, so attacking there with the intention of complete control would only tip their hands to all the other forces. As such, they would watch and wait for the opportune moment to strike and finally be free of this place. World of the Living. Urahara Shop. Our final stop before this interesting ride ends is a meeting being held by a group of women in the Urahara Shop basement, and not just any women, but a group of 6 Shinigami. These women were all known to Naruto. They were Satsune Uchiha, Soi-Fong, Nemukuritsuchi, Ranjiku Matsumoto, Isen Katetsu, Uruchi Shinen, and Kurana Yuhi. Those who knew them and knew Naruto would obviously be able to guess what their meeting was about, but a dense idiot like Naruto would have been unable to guess at the purpose, even if they told him to his face. The purpose that was only confirmed when Satsune spoke up to start the meeting. As you all know, we are here for one purpose and one purpose alone, to decide who gets to be with our blonde baka. So one by one, list why you like him and why you think you deserve him. Obviously, the conversation that followed involved a lot of cursing and yelling, along with accusations and violence, but in the end everything worked out. And the discussion's results would be felt for an eternity. Yeah, I am a beep for not elaborating, but due to the harem list, anyone with a brain should know what happened. At the present, we find Aizen's little group of elite minions gathered around the meeting table in the middle of the throne world. Over the previous week, they attempted to increase their strength as much as possible, as their lord commanded they do, with varying levels of success. However, for the most part it was at best a modest boost that they gained during that week. After they all gathered together, it was another 5 minutes until Aizen and Jin arrived, both of whom had castings where their missing arms once were, and when Aizen spoke it was in a jovial tone. Good day, my Espada. As you can tell, I have started the process to regain mine and Jin's arms, and we should be back to full capacity in a week at the most. He paused here for the Espada to politely clap at their leader's announcement, and when they stopped he spoke again. However, Ulquiorra and Yami, I have a special task for the two of you. When the two Espada nodded to show that they were listening, the one of God spoke again. I want the two of you to go to the human world, specifically Karakura town, and test the defenses there. You are to withdraw if it looks like you would lose, or if the situation becomes unfavorable. Is that understood, Yami? The last bit was directed specifically at the larger Hollow because he was stubborn and would probably fight on even against impossible odds, unless ordered to retreat by Aizen. Normally he would fight on even if ordered to retreat, but he knew Aizen's Zanpakuto made resisting his will, after seeing it released, next to impossible, and that if you did succeed at that, then he would make your life, or afterlife, absolutely worthless. As such, he nodded, grudgingly, along with Ulquiorra, and then left for the transport hub that would send them to Karakura. In the meantime, Aizen spoke again. Everyone else, though, I have another task for you. You see, well, Karakura Town is my main concern. I need to see if we can't divide Soul Society's attention, as I need you to scout other areas of the human world and determine if they would be suitable to send hollows to so that we can draw the guards' attention from our primary goal and at the same time increase the power of our foot soldiers so we can fight them on more even footing. Meanwhile, in the deepest depths of hell, we find an old man who looks a bit like a classical representation of Zeus if he had 3 eyes and wings, sitting on a throne and laughing while staring at a TV showing what's going on in Hueco Mundo. This Asian character is an idiot. Even if he manages to destroy Soul Society, he'd merely be leaving his newly forged kingdom ripe for conquest by us or heaven. One of the lesser demon lords, a figure that seemed to be completely made of living metal in the shape of a twisted mockery of a knight's armor, spoke up. My Lord Mundus, shouldn't we act now to remind our slaves, those worthless hollows, of their place beneath our boots, before that foolish Shinigami gives them more delusions of grandeur and invites a war between the 5 realms? The much larger winged being laughed. Calm yourself, Horus, I have been in contact with Heaven's ambassadors and they have sworn not to attack us, as the non-aggression treaty dictates, until the seals are broken. Horus scowled at his lord. I strongly disagree with your trusting anything from those pompous pigeons. Abaddon's war faction is gaining considerable influence in heaven. At this rate war might happen much sooner than we would like, especially with the hollows no longer under our control. Mundus concentrated a mere 20th of his power on his vocal subordinate, sending him to his knees, before speaking again. Do you dare question me, Horus? Horus quickly bowed his head and spoke in as steady a voice as possible. No, my lord, I'm just voicing my concerns. Mundus kept his glare up for 2 more heartbeats to make sure his message got through before relenting and going back to watching his new favorite comedy. A's in the Idiot's War. Human World. Karakura Town, Park. The Gargantua opened and the 2 mismatched espadas exited the portal, but for some reason they felt a bit off in a way they couldn't describe. However, they soon realized what it was when they saw things they didn't remember doing in their own minds. It was their memories from their previous lives before they became hollows returning to them. Yami saw another muscled bold man, except he was clad in a strange-looking suit of armor, had a black mustache on his face, and had what looked like a monkey's tail around his waist. Much like he currently was, though he didn't realize it, the man he saw was extremely, how should I put this, dense when it came to acceptable actions, and his allies' attitudes, a trait that led to the person being killed twice. But if there was one thing that could be said about that Nappa character, it was that he lived his life to the fullest and had a lot of fun. Ulquiorra, on the other hand, saw a young man who was dealt a mixed bag in life's lottery. He started off loved by his family, who happened to be rich as heck, however he was orphaned when some low-life criminal who tried to rob them. He then watched as the young man grew in a costumed vigilante to fight against the crime that claimed his family. Over his life he gained many friends, but he gained even more enemies, before dying protecting his beloved city from an alliance of all his most formidable villains. The one lesson Ulquiorra took to hear from these memories of his time as the Batman was that one was a lot more powerful than they were normally when they had something they wanted to protect. Cliché, I know, but what the hell do you want from someone who watches Batman's life? They quickly filed away their new memories and the few skills they could use before flaring their spiritual pressure to draw on whoever was spiritually aware, and soon enough they detected several signatures approaching quickly. The closest one was the weakest, and as much as the small but growing morals with Ulquiorra rebelled at the thought, the tactically soundest thing to do was to hold that person hostage. Unfortunately for the young black-haired woman, Tatsuki, Yami was not gentle when he captured her, and as such, she was not only knocked out cold, but given a concussion, as well as a minor case of internal bleeding. As such, unbeknownst to the other spiritually aware beings in Karakura Town that were speeding to the area, it had become a race against time to defeat the hollows and rescue Tatsuki before she died, and her soul became hollow food. The 2 mismatched espadas sat waiting for their targets to arrive, while making sure their captive didn't escape. A couple of times Yami had asked if they could kill the black-haired girl. However, Ulquiorra refused, stating that a hostage is only beneficial as long as they are alive, something that Yami begrudgingly agreed with. However, Ulquiorra had a different bone to pick with Yami than his desire to kill and consume. After all, it is his nature to do so. 2. His annoyance with Yami sprung from the idiot asking a certain question. One he was about to ask again. For the last time, Yami. They are not here yet. It will be obvious when they arrive. At that last statement 2 of their targets arrived, Uchiha and Yuriko, which prompted Ulquiorra to crack a small grin. I told you you'd know when they arrived. And if Lord Aizen's information is correct, the one with the orange hair is Uchiha Kurosaki, while the other is Yuriko Ishida. Yami cracked his neck a couple of times before grinning viciously. It's alright if I kill them, right, Ulquiorra? I don't think from their spiritual pressure that they would be able to fight me and survive. The shorter Espada thought for a second before responding. While Lord Aizen would probably prefer to see how they would grow and change from this, I'm sure he wouldn't mind if we eliminated two of the threats to his plan. Especially considering the fact that being human gives them no limits if they strive towards their goal hard enough, so yes Yami, if you can't avoid it, I think you could get away with killing them. The big brute smiled before charging the two humans, who had tick marks on their faces from being ignored by their foes. Surprisingly enough, the big guy was extremely fast, around low captain level, and easily started to utterly demolish the two girls in front of him, his nature demanding death and destruction. However, the two soon received reinforcements from Orochimaru. At the sight of the orange-haired girl, Ulquiorra felt something foreign, before locking it down for later, and Chad, and with the help of those two, they managed to temporarily throw the giant off his game. However, he soon adapted, and began to once again crush the feeble resistance the four were putting up. However, he was forced to dodge a wall of black flames. When he turned to the source, he saw Satsune Uchiha. You know, I never gave you all a good clear idea of what she looks like if I'm not mistaken. So let me make up for that now. S452. Photobucket user Naruto Girls FC Media 8BA 6306 AD3 CED 71 F400 DAF1B 9C9 F2351.png.html. Obviously no spaces in the address. And Kurina Yuuhi. With the help of the two-seated Shinigami, they managed to hold Yami back. However, all this was doing in reality was making Yami angrier and angrier, despite the fun he was having. As such, he was getting closer and closer to releasing his resurrection, despite Ulquiorra stating quite clearly that the use of ire was strictly forbidden. It was right as Yami's resurrection was about to activate on its own from all the rage the 10th Espada had within him from the fight that Naruto arrived on the scene. His mere presence was enough to stop the fight, as his spiritual energy commanded that they cease fighting. He then spoke in a calm tone. Oi, let the girl go, Espada. If you don't, I promise that when I severed Aizen and Jin's limbs will look like nothing more than a scratch compared to what I will wreak upon you. The sheer calmness he spoke with when he said that was enough to convince Ulquiorra that it would be exceedingly stupid for him to continue to hold Tatsuki hostage, and promptly got out of his way, well, a shadow clone's way at any rate, when it went to collect Tatsuki's unconscious form. When the clone got her back to Naruto, his face became blank. Tell me, which of you two knocked her out? Yami, who at that moment seemed to gain Nappa's stupidity, spoke with a grin. That was me, yup, totally me. I knocked her the tuck out. Then I put her over by that tree. But before Yami could continue to run his mouth, a massive gouge appeared on his chest, which caused him to start coughing up blood. He then looked back at Naruto and saw that he had jumped straight to Bankai, however it looked different from before. Instead of having swept back silver hair, it was spiked up like in his base form. The blue long coat had become a purple version with gold trim, under it was a white noble shirt and black pants. He also had brown combat boots. His eyes had become much like those of a Hollow's, an evil yellow with a black slit-like pupil, and also, much like a Hollow, his skin became deathly pale. With black lines on his face. Everyone was shocked at this, however it was Ulquiorra who asked the question on everyone's mind. Are you like us, Uzumaki? Do you have hollow powers along with your Shinigami ones? The cold mocking laugh that sent chills down their spines erupted from the corrupted, for that was the only descriptor that applied to this Naruto version of the Shinigami. You dare compare me to you weaklings? Ha. I am not as hollow, as you so ignorantly assumed. I am the darkness within his soul, given self-awareness by the awakening of Onum. And as you probably don't know, Onum's Bankai is the soul of a long-dead half-devil by the name of Virgil Sparta, thereby making me a half-devil. After taking a second to drink in their shock, he spoke again. Now you fools may be wondering why I just give that all away. Well, the reason is simple. You aren't leaving the world of the living alive. And with that, the dark Naruto charged. The instant he started moving, the two Espada raised their blades to defend themselves, only to find that the strength behind this dark Naruto strikes was monstrous. Yami's right arm, the one he used to hold his blade, completely shattered under the force of one strike. Ulquiorra, on the other hand, only suffered a shattered left wrist. However, their shock only gave their foe an open window to strike at them. Something that, to their immense shock, this dark version did not exploit. Seeing their shock, the twisted version chuckled. I take it you're wondering why I didn't take advantage of your weakness to finish you off. The answer is quite simple. I want you to see how utterly outclassed you are. I want you to realize, as the life leaves your pathetic miserable bodies, that your greatest mistake was siding with that glasses-wearing fool of a traitor who, I shall take great pleasure in ripping out his spine and choking him with it. The two Espada, as well as Naruto's allies, sweet-dripped when he stopped making sense immediately after that statement and started ranting about the weirdest things like why the last piece of bacon always tastes the best or why the sake is always gone. The bald one, quite stupidly, thought to take advantage of the half-devil's distraction, only to get knocked out by the still ranting silver-haired swordsman, kicking him in the crotch before bicycle kicking him in the chin. Ulquiorra noticed that his foe didn't even seem to notice Yami's attack really, which means that he was reacting on reflex and instinct testing. If he was really oblivious or not, he threw a couple of ballas at the Shinigami, only for them all to be batted away by Yamato's sheath. When no retaliation came, he decided that the swordsman was lost in his increasingly nonsensical rant. As such, he decided to revive Yami so he could use his resurrection to defeat their foe. With that in mind, he slowly started inching his way over to the fallen 10th, a small ball of spiritual energy, ready for use to heal and wake his ally. While he didn't know what Ulquiorra had in mind, his rage instantly provided the action Ulquiorra had planned on him taking. He activated Ira and changed into a much larger and more monstrous version of himself, and his power skyrocketed to a high enough level to make his foes, except Naruto, fall to their knees and cause many humans in the area to suffer minor heart attacks. The dark version of Naruto was thoroughly unimpressed, something he made abundantly clear when he spoke. "What the hell are you supposed to be? Some sort of Godzilla ripoff?" While Yami didn't know what that referred to, he understood it was an insult and began charging a massive zero, unwittingly proving the insult to be a dead-on assessment of his abilities in the new form. Dark Naruto didn't even flinch at the sight of the massive zero, he merely unsheathed and resheathed his blade, causing thousands of orbs of dark energy, which were merely representations of Yamato's power, destroying the bounds of space and time to strike its target, to briefly appear before vanishing again. The result of that single attack was a literal waterfall of blood cascading down that monster's hollow and sending it back into unconsciousness and forcibly shrinking it back to normal size. It was then that Ulquiorra knew that they had no chance in hell against Dark Naruto. However, it was at this point that something unexpected happened. The dark version of Naruto grabbed his head and growled. "The hell are you doing, original? I have this well in hand, these bastards won't ever hurt another being if I can just finish them off. Stay out of this, original. Damn it." With a final roar of anger and a burst of power that blinded everyone long enough for Ulquiorra to take Yami and flee back to Hueco Mundo, the form of corrupt Naruto disappeared and was replaced by the normal Bankai mode. Normal Naruto scowled darkly as he returned to his normal state. "It seems I have an inner problem to deal with later. In the meantime, let's see if my clone is as good as I think it is at medical ninjutsu. If not, then I'm going to have to hurry to get Totsuki to the hospital." As he said this, he walked over to Totsuki's still form and ran a brief diagnostic jutsu, and he let out a sigh of relief. "Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that the internal bleeding has stopped, as such her life is no longer in danger from that. The bad news though is that she'll be bedridden for several weeks recovering." His assembled allies cursed under their breath at the news. While she wasn't the strongest among the spiritually, she was still strong and a great friend to them all. Naruto then turned to Orochimaru and Itachi. "Would you two mind getting Totsuki back to her home? I would do it myself, but her neighbors don't know me and I don't want to start rumors just yet." The two girls nodded their heads in acceptance before going to carry their friend to her house. In the meantime, Naruto issued orders to the rest of his team to watch over the city as he had to deal with his newly revealed darkness. The blonde duel's Anpakuto wielder slowly descended the stairs he had hidden underneath the training ground, using a small Ryutsu-powered torch to light his way as he headed towards his hidden meditation chamber. It had taken a lot of effort to get this chamber created and hidden, including seals to hide his presence, as well as the presence of the chamber from scanning and Ryutsu sensing techniques, as well as most other ways to find hidden objects and beings, well enough for him to even consider using it. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, he smiled slightly as he opened the large temple complex-style doors and was met with the sight of his hidden sanctuary. It was a massive cave with crystals that created natural light in the area all around, a small traditional Japanese house, and a massive lake with 9 waterfalls cascading into it. The magic of high-powered earth and water manipulation being wielded by one who had centuries to master his Ryutsu manipulation to the point he could replicate most shinobi feats. This area was his hidden stronghold within his hidden base, somewhere he could do what he needed to without fear of harming his allies or being interrupted at a critical moment. On top of that, this area, and all within it, would be able to survive even the end of the world if the door to the artificial cave was closed. As he debated which way would be the best to meditate, his mind supplied one of the most cliched meditation techniques ever used. Standing or sitting under a waterfall nearly or fully nude. Since he didn't believe anyone would be coming down here, he decided to go with that method. And after stripping down to nothing, he used water walking to put himself underneath the largest of the 9 waterfalls in a straddling the crane position. After doing that, he closed his eyes and focused on reaching his soulscape. Naruto's soulscape. When he opened his eyes to take in the view of his soulscape, he was stunned to see that instead of the usual bloody battlefield that it usually was, it was now a massive tower with rivers of blood running down its sides and a dark red sky above. Drawing on what Virgil taught him of the demon world, he realized that his soulscape had taken on the form of the Tower of Tenmi no Guri, the gateway to the demon realm. But before he could think too deeply on the irony of this new development, he was interrupted by a colder and more malevolent version of his own voice. "So, you came. I wonder why you have come here. What is it you seek to accomplish by entering your soulscape?" Naruto quickly spun around to find himself face to face with his dark alter self and calmly replied. "So you're the one who took over during my fight with those two Espada. I've got to say, I'm not that impressed." See, Naruto grinned darkly and chuckled mirthlessly as he replied. "What, did you expect some kind of hideous monster who rants about devouring your soul or about how you're the fake and will soon be replaced? Grow up, this is the real world. Well, crazy shit like that does happen. Crazy stuff is not something that you can expect at every turn." The original grinned at that. "I guess you have a point there. But shouldn't you be, oh I don't know, a little more evil and unhinged?" Naruto's corrupt version scoffed at that. "Come now, I would think you know that those anime and manga ideas are cliché as tuck. I mean, come on. Just because I am dark and corrupt, as in everything you bottle up, doesn't make me evil. All I am is a darker version of you, same likes, dislikes and everything." Naruto smiled a bit at his dark version speech. "I get it, you're not evil but you're still a little unstable if what I'm sensing is correct." That elicited a ghost of a smile from his corrupt counterpart. "You're correct. I am a little unstable, both mentally and existence-wise, due to the fact that I received more of the negative energy that we had in life than you did. All that dark energy makes me extremely strong, but without an equal amount of good energy, I am relegated to being a secondary existence." The Shinigami gained a thoughtful frown. "Well, this is all well and good. I came here to decide what to do with you after you took control of me or, failing that, balance out whatever birthed you or overwhelm it to the point where you would no longer exist." The paler version of him grinned sadistically as he drew his copy of Onum. "Now you're talking. So come on then, you'll find I won't die easily." But the roar, the two combatants charged with their blades gleaming. In the base, same time. The rest of the team, minus Tatsuki and her escorts, had gathered in the upper area of the base, planning on talking with Naruto. However, they were unable to find him and as such began to search the base for him room by room. Eventually they found a false bookcase that, when activated, revealed a long tunnel. Correctly guessing that wherever he had disappeared to was at the bottom, they quickly followed the tunnel down as far as they could, and what they found down there surprised them. The massive Japanese-style temple gates were lavishly decorated, and from what an initial glaze could tell them constructed to be nearly indestructible. However, they still opened easily. And the sight within stunned them into silence, as the area was immensely beautiful compared to the dull drab tunnel they passed down, and then a vast wave of power swept over the room and knocked them all out. Naruto's copy of Onum clashed with his dark counterparts in a rapid dance of death. The two katanas sliced through the faux air of the soulscape with such speed that they caused distortions and displacements to occur, and, when the blades connected, they made massive shockwaves that would have ripped apart a real location, but the soulscape was holding up rather well. The two were equally matched when it came to using the base version, despite their slightly different styles. The one that existed in the outside world fought using an all-round style which gave him a great deal of flexibility. When it came to the fight, his dark doppelganger, on the other hand, used an extremely aggressive and fluid style that made up for its lack of defense with punishing and unpredictable blows. However, despite the deadlock they had entered, with neither being able to harm the other, that was about to change as corrupt Naruto activated the effects of Kapatora and drew a copy of Onum's base form as he switched to a dual-wield style, which let him attack in even greater ferocity. Naruto snarled as he parried one blow before dodging a follow-up strike. "That's cheating, you beep waffle." In return, his more demonic counterpart laughed. "Suck it up, your opponent won't always play by the rules. So quit your bissing and fight me." The blonde groaned as he backflipped and drew a simple sword-breaker-style knife, basically a dagger that has gaps to catch the blade of a sword in it and theoretically let the user break the sword at the capture point, and after a while, he managed to break the copy of his foe's sword with a well-timed catch and twist. His pale foe grinned darkly as he formed another blade using Kapatora. This time it was a European-style broadsword, except dark and evil, looking with a matte black finish from dried blood that clung to the blade, which, while not really compatible with Onum, was a lot more sturdy than the copy by nature of design. And once again dual-wielding, he charged the original. The blonde struggled a little under this assault, as his swordbreaker dagger was less effective now, but he quickly tossed the less effective weapon at his foe to force him to dodge or block and thus give him time to call forth a claymore from Kapatora. The claymore was a beautiful piece of work, with silver engravings, precious stones inlet in the pommel, and cross-guard. The blade itself was a very sturdy and high-quality 48 inches of Scottish steel. The claymore and the broadsword, which was 36 inches of blade, were evenly matched roughly, but the broadsword had a curse on it, apparently one that dissolved any metal it came into contact with for extended periods of time. As such, the claymore's steel was slowly disintegrating into nothingness. With its usefulness running out, Naruto decided to throw it at his doppelganger. He hoped that such a move would give him sufficient time to go to Shikai. Thankfully the Dark he did so as soon as the overconfident doppelganger dodged to the right. Destroy all in your path. On him. And a burst of power released by the release knocked the Dark Naruto back about 100 feet, and a wave of power and bloodlust sent the Dark copy to his knees and shattered the broadsword, which high-quality German steel and curse was nothing in comparison to the sheer power of the Zanpakuto. However, the darkness proved to be equal to Naruto, as not even a second after being forced to its knees, it also unleashed the Shikai of Onum. After the dust kicked up by the double Shikai release cleared, Naruto was slightly disturbed by the version of Onum grinning back at him. The white robe Haori was stained to a deep black by the blood of countless foes, the armor was slightly rusted, but still intact, as well as a much darker red from all the blood stains, and the blade of the sword itself was constantly dripping blood that seemed to be from all those who fell to the blade. Disgusted by the desecration to his blade, he spoke with a snarl. You seem to corrupt everything you touch, how can you be so foul and hateful? The pale version grinned mockingly. Corrupt? What makes you say that? This is just another aspect of Onum. You have used the blade so much that it is simply full of bloodshed and death, even more so than the original version was. After all, one doesn't get the title of Slayer of 1,000 men by being a goody two-shoes who doesn't kill anyone now, do they? Naruto was forced to concede that is more than likely, however he was still annoyed by it. But he swiftly squashed it and got back into the fight. Now that they were both in Shikai, they were much faster and stronger, and even the sturdy environment of Naruto's soulscape was starting to buckle under the strength of the blows those two juggernauts were unleashing. However, once again they were equally matched, at least on the surface. But in reality Naruto had a major edge, as he had practiced with his Shikai more and was able to use it more creatively with his style than the doppelganger could. But despite the edge, the Dark One held his own quite well before he got angry and once again used Kapatora, but this time he activated its Shikai first. Copy all who fall under your gaze. Kapatora. The backpack was now completely different than the one Naruto activated as soon as he heard the Dark version activate his. Instead of the original's golden exterior, this one was clad in tarnished silver. Instead of the second division emblem on it, it had blood red kanji all over the exterior, ranging from death to murder and destruction. It also had numerous bloodstains on it and trails that looked like from where some blood splashed against the box from a dying person. And once again both went for different weapons. The Dark version went for a second copy of Tenyo again, but Naruto he picked a blade that the Dark copy was unfamiliar with but could easily admit was beautiful. As they were staring each other down, neither noticed the small cracks that had appeared in the soulscape nor the way that the artificial sky was getting stormier. As the first flash of lightning lashed at the ground, the two clashed. The two swordsmen clashed as the storm, born of pure power, opened fully. The rain slowly turned the ground to mud while the blades clashed. Obviously the two Shikai balanced each other out, but surprisingly for the Dark copy the European longsword managed to hold its own against Onum. But Naruto was not surprised, he had specifically picked that sword because of what it was not his Zanpakuto, which was surprising given the fact that the Spirit King had taken legends to make his current blades, but it was still a legendary blade, one that the Dark entity would have recognized because of how well known this blade was. Except for the fact that its true nature was being concealed. The blonde was concealing its true nature for a trump card, as well as the fact that since this blade was meant to only be wielded by one person, meant that using any of the abilities of the blade would take a much longer time than normal, so it was also to allow him time to discreetly charge the ultimate attack of that blade. Unfortunately for the doppelganger, while it was an equal in marital skills, he could not sense spiritual energy as well as his foe, and thus the discreet charging of the blade went on undetected as the two continued to clash, their blades causing the soulscape to shake and quail every time they connected. However, despite the damage being done, the unbreakable will of the combatants held the area together in their desire to finish the fight. And 5 minutes of constant fighting later, the charging was complete just in time for the two to separate to catch their breath and come up with new attack patterns. It was then that the blade began to morph into its true appearance, much to the surprise of the corrupt one. It was 5 feet long, with elegant scroll work, beautiful gilt, a thin layer of gold applied over a different material, work along the hilt, with beautiful sapphires inlet in the gilt work, and a razor-sharp edge, and all it was a masterfully made blade, and could only be one sword. The Dark One growled when he spoke. Now who's cheating? You really brought the sword of promised victory, tucking Excalibur, into this? Screw you, you cheating blonde ass. Naruto laughed at his dark foe's anger. To quote you. Suck it up, your opponent won't always play by the rules. So quit your bissing and fight me. They once again rushed one another. Before Naruto activated the special ability of Excalibur, the blade began to radiate a golden aura as Naruto prepared the attack that was synonymous with the blade. At the same time, to counter that move, corrupt Naruto prepared two Mizuchis to at the least lessen the damage. When the two attacks were launched, they met in a catastrophic explosion. That explosion blasted them apart by over 100 feet and caused a massive hole to appear in the soulscape. This is where everyone in the real world got knocked out despite the damage the soulscape was barely holding together. Naruto, seeing for the first time all the damage inflicted upon his soulscape, dismissed Excalibur, but kept on him at the ready. When the dust cleared he saw his darker version bloodied and battered, holding two broken copies of Onum, propped up against one of the piles of corpses, but still alive. Not even a second later the Shikai of his foe dispersed, likely from wounds. Because of this Naruto also dismissed his and walked over to his fallen foe. As he made his way over to his adversary, he was suddenly struck by realization that what he was doing was a little out of character for him. As he got closer he noticed his dark version was rising to his feet very unsteadily, as such he kept his blade at the ready in case his opponent wanted to go another round. But, fortunately, it seemed like he had knocked most of the fight out of his adversary. However, that wasn't important. What was important was the feeling that what he had been doing wasn't something he would normally do, was getting stronger, as was a darker, almost, but not truly evil, presence he was beginning to sense. As he was pondering what it could be, his corrupt counterpart rose unsteadily to his feet, using a spear he called forth to support himself. Then he laughed. It was a surprisingly warm and happy one for someone with his nature who had been defeated so soundly, but it still had a level of bloodlust Kenpachi would be proud of. He soon stopped laughing and smiled at Naruto before he spoke. "Good fight, I'm happy that I got one against someone of your caliber before I died, Naruto." Naruto chuckled at that. His corrupt self was a lot like Kenpachi. "Who said I was going to kill you? I believe I said that I came here potentially to get balance, but I see now that it would be foolish to try and eliminate you. You're as much a part of me as the Zanpakuto we both carry." The dark version's smile changed to a contented smirk at that. "What, going to pull that two sides of the same coin cliché, or yin and yang to justify yourself?" The blonde swordsman laughed. "Nah, that's too obvious. How about we just call it a partnership and call it even?" Here he stuck his hand out for his counterpart to shake. "Deal?" The paler version shook the extended hand, and surprisingly, at that very moment, the wounds that littered both their forms started to close rather quickly, and the damage to the soulscape also began to repair. But a loud and terrible roar shook the air at that moment, and the soulscape shook as if under the impact of a giant creature, making its way to the two tired fighters. At that point they saw something out of nightmares, the QB. It was Holofying and looked like a badly decayed zombie. Its voice was deep and rasping when it spoke. "You bastards, do you have any idea how close I was to escaping? If one of you had killed the other, then I could have escaped back to the homeland and started to reverse this shameful situation. But because of what you did, I will have to kill the both of you to escape, so do me a favor and die." As it finished venting a little of its anger, its 9 tails lashed out at its jailers, ready to kill them. As the tails swept down on them, the two tired fighters barely managed to dodge the 9 lethal implements. They were still steadily recovering from their fight, but it was now much slower than before as the soulscape and their bodies couldn't focus on regenerating while they were busy trying not to die at the tails of the QB. As such, while Naruto himself was operating close to his usual abilities, his counterpart was not, as numerous minor wounds, which were slowly healing, were slowing his reaction time down. He was still good enough to avoid the probing attacks the QB launched to test them. If it was any of the tailed beasts below 5 tails, then the weakened state the corrupt version of Naruto was in wouldn't be too much of a handicap. However, the QB was deadly intelligent, even compared to other tricksters, and was able to see the weakness clear as day and began to plot a way to eliminate him first. And the fastest solution to eliminate the weakened corrupt half was to throw all 9 of the tails at him to force him into a spot he couldn't escape and then blast him with a menacing ball or bearing that use 4 tails to restrain him and then rip him limb from limb. Decisions in the end the QB decided to go with the first choice. But that plan in mid, it quickly separated the two and carried out the planned attack. As predicted, Naruto swiftly dodged all the tails right into where the QB expected him. As the dark copy realized his error, the hollow was charging up the menacing ball while having the tails surround him. It seemed like the plan would work perfectly, but right before it could release the attack, a truly massive explosion rocked the QB's form, forcing it to cease its attack. When it turned to where the other Naruto was, he saw the blonde holding a massive cannon that would look more at home on a mech than in the hands of a human-sized figure. It watched as a weapon it vaguely recognized from the Gyuubi's memories was loaded into the back of the gun, a tactical nuke. Back before the sage came and kicked the Gyuubi's ass and separated it, nuclear weapons were the only weapons that could seriously injure it, and even then the nukes had to be full-blown ICB grade, not TAC nukes. Unfortunately for the world of the past, only Russia and America had fired those weapons, and the generals who fired them did so with their last breaths when the Jaiwubi destroyed their bases, the rest of the world being too concerned about the lasting impact the weapons would leave to use their arsenals. Unfortunately for the Great Fox, while he was the largest fragment of the Jaiwubi, he was not as powerful as his progenitor, as such that nuke hurt him quite badly. In retaliation, he destroyed the launcher by ripping it into tiny fragments with its tails, never realizing that the nuke launcher and the shadow clone was a distraction. The real Naruto was with his dark copy. Close call, huh? Yeah, real close. Anyways, I have a plan. If I pull this off, the QB should, at the least, be crippled by it. Well, that sounds promising. I'll need you to keep it occupied though. Well, that doesn't sound too bad for 5 minutes, and considering that it had us on the defensive, nah, you'll be fine. Forget I said anything. Naruto blinked, but shrugged. It wasn't like he hadn't done suicidally stupid things before, it's just that he hadn't done any in a long time. That last time being when he was still a fresh behind the ears recruit challenging Kenpachi to a spar. That one incident almost ended his career before it started, but that spar in the end showed that there were monsters in the spiritual world that were stronger than Orochimaru. However, he knew that whatever his doppelganger had planned was probably one of the most efficient ways to finish this fight, one way or another. Quickly, as his job for the plan was to be the distraction, he decided to temporarily release his prankster side. Oi. Giant zombie fox, yeah you. I'm talking to you, you overgrown mutt. I bet you couldn't hit me even if all I did was walk. That managed to set the short fuse of the fox's temper off, however it wasn't completely enraged to the point Naruto wanted it to be. As such, he continued to taunt the Holofian creature about everything, to its looks, to speed, and parentage. The constant taunt, plus the fact that Naruto was moonwalking around every attack thrown his way, sent the gigantic beast into the rage that the blonde was hoping for. Unfortunately though, while a lot of higher reasoning was lost to the beast now, the fact remained that in this berserker mode, it was faster, stronger, and cleverer on a base animal level. Naruto nearly paid with his life several times when his attention slipped, however his skills enabled him to just barely survive. However, disaster struck 30 seconds short of when Naruto would have been ready to strike. The QB unleashed 10 menacing bombs at the same time, one from each tail and one from its mouth. The beams of energy lashed at the soulscape, forcing Naruto into a dead end where the beams started to converge. Is this it? Is this the end for me, beaten by the same burden I was cursed with as a child? However, before the beams could converge, a human-sized shape jumped in the way. The light would only allow his silhouette to be revealed, but that was enough for Naruto to recognize the one who saved him. Even as the beams ripped him apart, it was Naruto. The original stared blankly at the doppelganger, almost in silent disbelief as he fell to his knees, as his previous foe had sacrificed himself. However, what was really going on was that somehow the actions of his opposite opened a temporary mental link between the two. As such, they were in deep conversation about what to do. They tossed numerous ideas out quickly. Eventually only one option remained, as the rest relied on the dying Naruto being at least somewhat combat capable to become one being, one perfectly balanced in both light and dark aspects. With that in mind, the original forced himself to rise to his feet and slowly walk over to his fallen half. While Naruto made his way to the side of his fallen version, the QB, seeming to understand what they were intending, unleashed a storm of menacing balls at Naruto, but no matter how many were fired, none ever seemed to get anywhere near the blonde. Quite frankly, it was rather eerie and was making the giant fox more than a little uneasy. An unease that was proved to be justified when the man touched his counterpart's hand and a flash of bright light engulfed the entire area. When it died down, Naruto wasn't changed too much physically, save for his hair having streaks of silver through it and that his eyes now had a subtle glow about them, but his power and aura had doubled in intensity. His clothing had also changed. Now, instead of the standard Shinigami garb, he was clad in what seemed like a mix of Onam Shikai, Bankai, and the normal uniform. He was garbed in a black trench coat, had silver samurai-style armor on his torso, and the normal uniform underneath both. The QB, knocked out of its rage by the feeling of pure power that dwarfed its own, stared in shock at the new Naruto. But that shock quickly gave way to anger, and it was about to rant at the swordsman for what he had done, when Naruto's voice snapped out at the fox. Be silent. Keep your tongue locked behind your teeth, you have not earned the right to speak, in fact you lost the right to even exist. The last word came out as a roar as pure unadulterated power ripped out from the blonde and slammed straight into the giant fox, sending it over 1,000 feet backwards, just from the sheer force of that power being unleashed. The kitsune eventually righted itself soon after, as the force that sent it flying was weaker out by where he finally stopped himself. As soon as the QB righted itself though, Naruto appeared in front of it and grabbed its muzzle. He then slammed the great beast down hard before running at top speed, grinding the beast's face into the ground, grinding the pseudo-flesh and bone of the hollow way. He then tossed it into the air and proceeded to play pinball, using the QB as the ball, bouncing the former demon everywhere. When Naruto stopped playing pinball with the QB, the massive beast was battered and broken, looking like nothing more than a broken pile of flesh and bone. Unfortunately though, a being of such great power would not fall so easily, and it quickly regenerated by using up 50% of its total power, which left the great beast critically weakened. A fact which the new Naruto was more than ready to exploit. A salvo of tactical nukes from a dozen shadow clones sent the evil beast to its knees. The kid soon coughed up its pseudo blood as the Shinigami strode over to it, glaring balefully with one eye at the sword user. It spoke in a tone full of hate and venom. You bastard, you don't even fight fair." But before it could continue, the blonde cut him off. "Fair? One such as you, who has killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, with contemptuous ease and overwhelming power dares to speak of fairness? You're a coward, and it's time for you to vanish." As he was speaking, his blade changed to its Shikai form, but his clothes stayed the same, and he slowly drew it from its sheath, filling the air with the ominous sound of metal being slowly drawn from within a sheath. In a voice that barely rose above a whisper, Naruto called upon the ultimate technique of Onim's Shikai. Mumyo Jinpyu Ryu. The Golden Wind, Karyu. And with a blindingly bright flash of golden light, the QB ceased to exist, and Naruto returned to the real world, more powerful than ever before. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.